That's very interesting what you say. That's right. Yes.
So there's absolutely no centre to it.
Yeah.
But the reason that we undergo all the suffering is because there has to be the opportunity to see that in context. Because when there's the sense of another, then there can be the sense of separation. So the idea that someone else is suffering in this location can give rise to compassion. It can give rise to, other feelings that give a depth to the experience, but also a depth to the knowing of awareness. Because when there is simple awareness that's knowing it, there's no context to that.
Yes.
But with suffering and with separation, and if you look at the way manifestation appears, it's actually the kind of polar opposite to the nature of present awareness, because present awareness it's permanent, it's still, it's immovable, you can't move to it, you can't move away from it.
Yeah.
It always knows itself.
Yeah.
So if you take those and then you look at what is the opposite of that, what appears is separation, pain, ignorance, not knowing itself, the idea that it can move away from itself, the idea that there's time, that you can move miles and miles away from where you are, and that you have to go and find something, that there's something to be found when actually you're already home. And actually when it's pointed out, it's just seen really clearly that the appearance of things is actually just in total contrast to the true nature of things. And the reason it does that is to give the knowing of itself a context. Because without that, there is just the knowing, but that knowing is without a comparison.
I was just thinking about when you said, I think in our little chat last night, you talked about the personal God and the impersonal God. Do you want to explain that for our viewers?
Okay, I'll have a go.
What those two sides are?
Okay. Well, some people believe in God. They say, oh, there is God, I believe in God, and, there are all these miracles to show that. But actually, the impersonal aspect of God is the awareness in which everything arises.
Yes.
So you could say that it's consciousness. People, modern scientists say, well, there is energy and you can't destroy energy. But actually the substratum of that is consciousness. But because it is the awareness that knows everything, so awareness or consciousness is conscious of energy, you can't do a little experiment in a laboratory to find it, because it's that which is looking, it's that which is seeing what's taking place.
That's right, yeah.
So the impersonal aspect, and using God, which, is one term that can be used, is the description of that which allows everything to be. So there's no discrimination in those terms. But if you take the manifestation, there is the story of progress and there's the story of evolution.
Yes.
So it's that paradox that it's simultaneously totally present, but also it's totally dynamic in that it's evolving. So if you take life on Earth, for instance, from the most rudimentary forms of life that appeared 16 billion years ago, or whatever it was, through the life that appeared, in the seas and then on land, and then the animal forms, and then the most rudimentary human forms, to the more developed human forms, that there's this process that is taking place. And in terms of the focal point, there is development. So there is development of spiritual experience. So you may experience a level where there's complete confusion, there's complete loss of inner stability. But actually there can be development from that level through to a level of stability, to a level of knowing, and also to a level of expansion, so that the knowing is actually no longer dependent upon the mind, because what predominates in this age, in the way it's appearing at the moment, is the idea that it's the mind that knows everything, that decides everything, you know, committees are held and people describe things, and it's the functioning of the mind. But actually every creative person knows that what they do well and what they do effortlessly comes from a space that's beyond the mind.
That's right, yes.
And the most creative people in the world, whether they're politicians, whether they're actors, whether they're writers, whether they're philosophers, that knowing is actually coming directly from non-conceptual awareness, and the mind isn't intervening at all. So that level of development can also take place where the knowing and the trusting in that knowing becomes more profound.
Right.
So it's that simultaneous knowing of the total stability of present awareness and existence that never actually moves into manifestation, and the ever-changing appearance of everything that is happening. And that can develop. It's actually a phenomenal development.
Yes, yes.
And there is, in reality, there is no time, there is no
Yes.
development.
Yes.
But actually, because consciousness is the field of all possibilities, it can create that. It can make it appear as though all these things are happening. And, you know, there are all these different levels on which life can be experienced.
Yes.
And there can be a refinement, as you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
that there can be a raising of the vibrational level. So that consciousness is actually moving on to functioning on different levels. You know, this is a carbon-based level of experience. And, you know, there can be levels, you know, that are actually higher and lower than that. But actually, it's all known by awareness.
Yeah.
And consciousness isn't actually moving. Consciousness is the basis on which all of that can be known.
So, bringing those two together, the personal God with the unpersonal God, is like God walking on planet Earth, living this life of a human being, experiencing himself living through this body. Is this how you would see it? A man of the world, but not of the world?
Well, what I would say is
No,
that...
a man in the world, but not of the world. Yes.
Well, I would say that that is a man in the world, but not of the world.
Yes.
But I wouldn't say that is the level of divinity.
Yeah.
Because if you just take what is known of human experience appears to be limited. So what we can know in the mind of a human being is limited.
Yeah.
It's ever expanding, but it is limited. What can be experienced through the senses is limited. Generally, we only experience one thing at a time. But actually, if you look at the possibilities that are available, on the level of divinity, what you would call the level of the personal God would be where everything is known simultaneously.
Yes.
So
yes,
that consciousness could know every taste simultaneously, it could know every smell simultaneously, it could decide everything instantly.
Yes, yes.
And that would be the level. But actually, there's no comprehension of that. And also, that is a boundary to describe it in that way, because there are no limits within consciousness. So the possibilities, we can't even begin to conceive of what those possibilities are.
Yeah. Our minds are not developed enough.
They're just a little machine that we've used, you know, to do a few little jobs with.
Yes.
But you know, that's the game that it's playing, and it also